The night is dark and full of fear. Ghoul Realm invites you to a realm where the line between humans and monsters is blurred. Get ready to face your fears as we tell the harrowing story of Taehyung, who finds himself trapped in the clutches of an unforgiving forest and its terrifying inhabitants. This is EP3 of Ghoul Realm. Thank you for your subscription and likes. I hope you can leave your thoughts in the comments section. 16. To comfort. The next few days passed slowly, not like both were awkward anymore, but the cabin somehow suffocated them at times when they heard only the growls of the half-dead creatures. Jungkook was healing slowly because of a lack of medical facilities. Even when Taehyung tried to change the bandage regularly, also with great difficulties, they couldn't do better because they didn't have many clothes. In the past 3 days, Jungkook started walking on his own, limping here and there, but at least that hurt less than before. Taehyung was less awkward than that day and gladly accepted the small and sweet comments with feathery touches that left him all giddy inside. If he wasn't attracted to the other before, he surely was falling slowly for the older, and he didn't feel much bothered by that. At least, that all kept him sane in the small and suffocated cabin. That was reason to keep his hope that he wasn't alone. Someone was there for him, to take care of him and to be concerned about him. For him, it was for the first time to feel like that towards someone. Also, he never thought of liking some particular gender, but all of those jumbled up thoughts went straight as a line when the other started showing his affection towards him. Because he loved it, he loved the change from odd to comfort. Does it hurt? Taehyung softly inquired, watching the Revent walking with support from the cabin walls. Jungkook flashed a sweet but small smile, shaking his head negative before coming to him. He carefully sat beside the younger and pecked his forehead in complete affection, making the other male look down with pink cheeks, a sight to absorb. No, it doesn't hurt anymore. Just a bit irritating, but otherwise I can bear it. The silver-haired nodded his head when the other pulled back, but he could feel the stare. What are you staring at, Hyung? Jungkook chuckled at the question as he made himself fall back on the mattress, eyes still focused on the younger. Art of God. Taehyung snickered before playfully pinching the older's arm, to which the latter yelped slightly before bursting into fits of sweet laughter. Don't tease me, Hyung. Taehyung whined, pouting slightly but giggled when the other mimicked his gestures. They fell into comfortable silence, but Taehyung felt like asking the question that was kicking inside his mind for the past few days. Hyung. The other hummed, softly caressing his clothed knee, sending some shivers, but he didn't stop him, feeling at odd ease. Can we try to open it up till we can't go out? Pointing towards the locked door, he breathed out a bit, hesitated. Jungkook slightly frowned but sighed before sitting up straight, careful enough not to hurt his thighs. I can't try much because we don't have any tools to open it up, but if you want to try, go on. Just be sure not to hurt yourself, yeah? Taehyung nodded and slowly got up from the mattress to observe the lock. The lock was old and rusty, clear that no one used it for long. Pouting to himself, he shook the rusty lock a few times only to hear the disturbing rattling that clicked in his mind a bit. We need something heavy and hard to hit with. Jungkook's voice made him look back. Nodding his head, he agreed to the older. It was really clear that something heavy can break it easily because it was quite rusty. Okay. Let me find something. Jungkook chuckled at his eagerness but quickly stopped him. It's going to be dark soon. We can find something tomorrow morning. Taehyung sighed but smiled when the other made grabby hands. Now come here, I'm sleepy again. Seriously? You slept for almost half a day and are still sleepy? Jungkook shrugged his shoulders and snuggled into the mattress only to scrunch his nose on the odd smell from the old thing. Taehyung giggled before trudging back to his previous spot. As soon as his body hit the mattress, the other quickly wrapped his arms around his waist and both lay there in silence. It didn't take long when both of them were already in their slumber. Any news? The dark-haired boy sighed, shaking his head lightly in disappointment. The other just slumped down on the chair next to the other and rubbed his temple in frustration. Both of them had their hair messy, eyes bloodshot red, and face screaming tiredness. There is nothing to tail behind. It's like he just disappeared in thin air. No trace at all. The dark-haired boy grumbled in disbelief before leaning back on his leather chair. Faint whispers and chatters could be heard from outside of their office, but all of them seemed slightly concerned about them as well. After all, they were talking about Taehyung, the youngest and cutest reporter in their company. Jimin, let's try some other way. I'm getting crazy. The said dark-haired boy frowned at the suggestion. What can we do? There is nothing clicking in my mind. I lost my ability to think properly, like seriously. The other person, named Kim Seokjin, the eldest of their group, just watched with sad eyes as the younger looked really out of it. It's been more than a week now. Why they can't find him, Hyung? Jin fidgets with his fingers, hearing the other silently. He was the silent type of person among them all, but the most intelligent as well. Can we try to hack the last location of his phone? Police are trying on their own. Let's try our ways. Jimin cocked his brow, looking quite interested in his idea. Maybe it won't work, as the police said before that the last location was somewhere near the station. But let's not lose our hopes. Jin nodded, already dialing some numbers. Taehyung carefully looked around the fruit trees. There were some fallen logs, but those weren't much hard. Not even a single piece? Grumbling in disappointment, he looked around more. A basket filled with berries and apples was placed on the side. Pup? Taehyung flinched so badly when two arms wrapped around his waist and some weight leaned over his back. You startled me so badly, Hyung. Jungkook smiled before pecking the clothed shoulder of the younger, who just bit his lips. What took you so long? I was looking for a hard log, but here are all half rotten. Jungkook pulled back and also scanned the area with keen eyes. You're right, all are rotten. We need something hard. Taehyung silently nodded, taking the basket before going towards the other end of the cabin. Just when he was about to be close to the turn, he felt like someone rushed out of the place. What? His eyes turned wide as he quickly walked towards the end, because he was sure no ghoul can run that fast. Jungkook watched it with narrow eyes as the other rushed there, but gasped loudly. Tae? What's wrong? Jungkook asked as he limped towards the other, who almost disappeared behind the cabin wall. Just when he reached there, his eyes widened when he saw the other standing with horror-filled eyes. Pup dash. No answer. Younger kept standing there with shaky limbs, but nothing came out of his mouth, making the older more worried. Taehyung. When the other was still silent, he took hold of the other's hand and softly turned him around to frown in distress at the other's expression. Hey, what happened? Taehyung gulped thickly, pointing his finger in a direction that was leading toward the fence from the other side. Yes, what is it? Baby, please, you're scaring me. The raven-haired moved forward and softly cupped his face, caressing the slightly cold skin. Taehyung gulped thickly, his hands shaking that the basket almost slipped out of his grip. Pup dash. Hyung. Jungkook nodded his head, encouraging the younger to say more. There was someone. Hearing that, Jungkook slightly frowned but looked around as well to find no one. Are you sure? Taehyung licked his lips greedily, taking some deep breaths because his mind was haywire. Ghouls never entered this area, but if they did, we need to be quick to leave. Jungkook panicked, but Taehyung shook his head and his fearful eyes scanned around once before he dragged the other carefully back to the cabin. Once inside, he made Jungkook sit on the mattress, who had his eyes narrowed in concern and confusion before locking the door hurriedly. It wasn't a ghoul, Hyung. Taehyung stuttered out, voice low as a whisper that only doubled the confusion on the other's face. A human? Taehyung again shook his head and plopped beside the other, who was now losing his mind as well. Baby, what is it? You're really scaring me now. Jungkook scooted closer to the other, who had tears in his eyes now, their fruit basket almost forgotten near the table. Hyung, it wasn't a ghoul nor a human. Then? An animal? You scared me for nothing. Jungkook sighed like he was holding his breath for a long. Having an animal was a good sign, not something to be scared about, right? But his small sigh was replaced by a horrified look when the younger muttered the next words. It wasn't an animal as well, but something like in between a human and a ghoul. 17 Dread. The following night, Taehyung couldn't blink for the whole time, mind still occupied with the hybrid-like creature he saw in the evening. Jungkook was also very much confused about the matter. He tried to convince the younger that it will be fine, but when Taehyung couldn't agree with him, he fell silent, very deep in thought. Wide-open caramel eyes were focused on the locked door inside the cabin, soft breaths leaving his slightly parted lips because he was too much in a daze. He was sure that the thing wasn't a ghoul or a human. The thing looked very much tall like him, much faster with slight limps, clothes half torn but very much covering his body, black but dusty hairs reaching till his shoulders. He definitely saw his face as well, but just a glimpse. The face wasn't like a ghoul's but more human-like if he ignored the rotting skin near the jaw and eyes. Even if that was a small glimpse, he felt the other's piercing gaze right through his soul, and he just couldn't get rid of it. Facing his trauma wasn't easy when another problem was already there. It was a clear sign that they were not safe anymore because someone or something else was very much free to enter their safe place. A small thud from outside made him flinch badly, but right at that moment, a soft kiss was delivered on the back of his neck, followed by a warm breath and hand caressing his waist. "What happened, baby?" Jungkook's raspy voice inquired, but he was silent. Receiving no answer made the older to get up a bit by supporting his body on his left elbow. "Tae?" Another thud, and this time Taehyung got up as well, only to hug the other, taking him by surprise. Hey, it's okay. Don't be scared." Taehyung snuggled his face in the other's shoulder, while the other kept on patting his lower back after sitting properly. The noises from outside only repeated twice before getting silent again. Only distant growls of wandering ghouls could be heard. Jungkook kept on whispering comforting words in his ears, but he was more focused on the other voices. Every little voice was making him alert, scared that someone might break inside the cabin and tear them into pieces like that girl. Only the imagination of that made him shudder, causing him to tug over the other's old shirt and snuggle more with raged breath. It was like a silent message that Jungkook received. He scooped the other more to make him feel warm and protected. "I'm here, you're not alone. You're fine, okay? Just breathe, pup." Taehyung remained silent, just hearing the words as he internally prayed for everything to be a nightmare and opened his eyes back in his room with his soft blanket and bouncy mattress. A few minutes later, the older one of them laid back, taking the younger one with him as they both fell side by side on the uncomfortable bed. Taehyung was still sticking to the raven-haired, and the other didn't mind that at all. Instead, he kept on muttering sweet nothings to calm down his nerves, as he knew how much traumatic it would be for the silver-haired to live the new change. "I used to be scared like you in the first month." Taehyung opened his eyes when the other started in a whisper-like tone but didn't make any effort to move away. "But when I realized that no one is here for me, to comfort me, I learned to be emotionless, to be fearless, and to be my own strength." A small pause and the soft caresses just made the environment kind of comfortable again, so that the silver-haired could only focus back on their own breathing sounds instead of those blood-curdling growls. "You shouldn't be scared, and don't think too much about what you saw before. We will definitely leave this place and live our normal lives soon because you're not alone. I'm here for you, baby." Hearing that confirmation was very much comforting, and Taehyung just basked in that. "Thank you, Hyung." Jungkook chuckled lightly, pecking the younger's hair before pulling him more closer. "Anything for you, pup." Taehyung's lips curved a bit on that, making him close his eyes again when a soft kiss was delivered over his temple and then to his nose bridge. "Now get some sleep, you need to rest." Without saying anything, the younger nodded his head, hands still fisted over the other's shirt and face still snuggled closer to the other's neck, inhaling the musky scent that was oddly comforting as well. It took a little while as he slowly fell into dreamland, while sharing his body warmth with the older one. "Any news?" Jean shook his head, totally disappointed by the results he just got from his friend. He tried his best to get any information on the exact location, but unfortunately, the last location was just a few miles away from the station. "I'm sure the cab driver is involved in this all. I told him to be careful, but he never listened to me." Jimin patted the shoulder of the older, taking a chair near him. "I know, he was always so easygoing and trust everyone in an instant. Being too good is also a curse in this world." Jean sighed, rubbing his forehead with his fingers when his phone buzzed with email notification. He quickly took a look to be disappointed again. Another source showed the same results, means they were still stuck to the same point, having no lead. "I don't want to lose my hopes yet. I believe he must be alive and fine wherever he is." Jimin smiled sadly on hearing the other's words. "Me too, Hyung." "Oh, you're awake now." Jungkook chuckled, seeing the other sprawled silver hairs over the mattress and cute pout on his lips with sleepy eyes. "Don't laugh. I just woke up." The raven-haired again chuckled at the whine, and the pouty face was just too difficult to ignore. "Sure, pup, now get up and freshen up. I got us breakfast." Taehyung smiled but gasped loudly before getting up and rushing to the older, eyes scanning the other's legs very keenly. "Why you did do that? I told you to rest, and I'll do this till you heal properly." But I'm totally fine now. Look, it doesn't bleed anymore and I can walk on my own. Taehyung pouted again, stepping back before stomping back to the bathroom with his spare baggy pants, muttering something under his breath. Jungkook shook his head, setting the cleaned fruits back in the basket as he walked to the bed. It didn't take long when the silver-headed came out, slightly shivering after his shower with cold water. It's getting colder day by day. Gasping lowly on the shiver, he trudged towards the bed to find his bag to get his shirt. He was oblivious to the stare on his back, too busy finding something to just wear quickly to get rid of the coldness. Sighing in satisfaction once his upper body was finally covered, he turned his head to find the older staring down his soul, which made him slightly puzzled. Hyung, what's wrong? His innocent mind couldn't understand the dark gaze fixed over his now covered body. Nothing, Jungkook muttered after clearing his throat, but his pinkish cheeks said otherwise. Taehyung looked hesitated before going to him and softly touching his forehead. You're getting red. Is it because of a cold or do you have a fever? Jungkook smiled genuinely at the innocence of the other. He couldn't control himself anymore, and pulled the other beside himself before engulfing him in a bear hug. Hyung dash. Sure, just let me hug you. You just make me feel so giddy, baby. Taehyung bit his lips, hugging back the other. You also make me feel like that, Hyung. Jungkook pulled back with wide eyes and parted lips. What? Taehyung got shy the way other was looking at him with doe eyes. I feel strange when you touch me. I don't know what to call it, but it is more than just liking. Jungkook smiled brightly, engulfing the other again and pecking his head over and over again. You made me so happy, love. You just make me fall for you more and more, pup. You're just so perfect, so perfect for me. Hearing those words and a little bit of confession was enough to make his day better. Parting away after a while, he gave a full toothy smile to the younger. He placed the basket in between them. Here, let me feed you today. Taehyung wanted to protest, but the happiness on the other's face stopped him. The whole day, they talked about their life experiences while Taehyung shared more of them, telling the other about his friends and all. For a little time, he forgot about the tensions in his life till it was again dark. Jungkook was humming an unknown tone, hand busy massaging the younger scalp as both of them were laying beside each other. He was just so happy the whole day, and Taehyung felt at ease by seeing the sweet smile of the other. I forgot to tell you in the morning, but I found a heavy stone today. Taehyung's ears perked up at that. He got up from his laying position with excitement-filled eyes. Really? Where is it? Jungkook smiled for the nth time that day, and the reason was the adorable boy in front of him. Getting up from his laying position, he pointed towards the table near the window where a stone was placed on the wooden floor. Without wasting another second, Taehyung was already on his feet to get the stone, and in the next moment, he was facing the rusty lock. Time to reveal the secrets behind you. With full force, he hit the lock, but nothing much happened. Jungkook also came behind him to see what was behind the door. Let me try. Taehyung shook his head and hit the lock again, almost dropping the heavy stone on his own feet, and that's when Jungkook took it from his hands. Let me do it, pretty boy. You might hurt yourself at this rate. Huffing in disappointment, the younger nodded and stepped back to watch the other hit the lock. I thought it would break easily, but it's so hard. Taehyung frowned when the other kept on hitting the lock, but both of them turned back with wide eyes when they heard very disturbing noises coming from outside of the cabin. What's that? Taehyung muttered under his breath, not ready for another trauma, but the loud noise again startled them, followed by a loud scream from a male. His shaky pupils met with Jungkook's confused ones, but before they could move, they heard a loud thud from the ceiling of the cabin, as someone jumped there. Hyung dash. Jungkook quietly moved to get his knife, still hearing the voices from the ceiling as well as from outside. The loud screams of the male were mixing up with the increasing growls of the ghouls. Taehyung's eyes followed the olders each moment until he found the other was about to open the door. Everything happened like a wave of wind, almost knocking the air out of his lungs, making his heart drop in dread as the door burst open and a bony hand of someone pulled Jungkook out of the cabin right in front of his eyes, dragging him away from their safe place. Hyung, a teen mysterious being. The rustling and loud voices of the bustling crowd made it difficult to walk through and hear the person next to them. It's so rushy. Jimin groaned in frustration when he got pushed aside by a bulky man who just walked past him in a great hurry. Jin pressed his lips in a thin line as he carefully walked through the crowd, the younger following behind him in hurried steps. After getting the same location from many different resources, they decided to go to the place themselves and search for any other clue as police has almost given up on the case. Let's get a cab from here. Jimin scowled at the suggestion. Well, that wasn't in their plan. We have our own ride, then why a cab? Jin continued walking and looking around to find a cab, ignoring the others' words and a little protest. They found a cab parked at a distance, the driver busy and sipping on a plastic cup that must be coffee or something hot as the steam was leaving it in the cold weather. Once again, having a quick glance around the area, the older of the two marched towards the driver who had a khaki long coat and brown pants on. Are you on a break? Jin asked politely, to which the other gave him a look before nodding his head. Where do you want to go? Jimin stayed silent, watching the older to do whatever he want. I want to go to Dash. A phone call interrupted the two and Jin had to excuse himself as it was from his boss. Jimin stayed behind, watching as another boy get to the driver, and after a few words exchanged between them, the boy sat at the back with a bag and the driver threw his cup in the nearest dustbin before driving away. Where did he go? A boy took the cab and they just went away. Jin sighed disappointed but looked around for another cab but found no one else free. In the end, they decided to take their own car to reach the exact location. The location came out as a leading road to the highway, wide and clean without many traces from the past weeks. A few bushes and tall trees were present at a distance from the main road, but nothing much. It directly leads to the highway and then to Chuncheon. Also, Taehyung's phone was located here for the last activity. Jimin nodded, confirming while using the GPS. It means he was on the right way. Jin decreased the speed of their car, eyes carefully observing around as a few vehicles were moving along their own. I don't know, maybe or maybe not. Jimin's phone buzzed this time, and a small smile formed on his lips when he noticed the contact number. His new crush that would definitely not going to last long. Judging from his smile, Jin scoffed, mumbling something like not again that Jimin heard but gladly ignored. Hey my sweetie. Jin sighed again, trying his best to distract himself from listening to the sweet, extra sweet talk. But he still wishes that this time, he actually finds real love that he couldn't in past relationships. Ah, are you missing me already? Really? The change in Jimin's expressions was comical and Jin felt like crying for his single self. Yes. It's not giving us much lead, but we are still hoping for the best. Their conversation went on till Jin decided to go out of the car when they were exactly near the location. He turned on his torch as Jimin followed him after ending the call with lots of "miss you too." They carefully watched around the dry grass and sand but found nothing much. Of course, the police did a whole search of the area and found nothing. Not even the phone or any single trace. After spending about 1 hour, they felt defeated and decided to go back. I can't believe that he is gone, it's too much to digest. Hyung. Jin gritted his teeth, still not agreeing that their bubbly friend is gone. Taking a deep breath, he turned his head towards the younger before squeezing his shoulder in the assuring way possible. He is fine, I still believe that he is alive and fine. Hyung. Jungkook was still being dragged away from the cabin, causing the silver-haired to run behind him. The growling and the weird sounds just doubled over when he stepped out of the cabin. The darkness makes it difficult to see the one dragging his Hyung, but he could still see the Revent fighting against the grip against his throat. No. His body was desperately trying to reach the older, but the frantic movements of the mysterious being made it difficult. After spending 1 or 2 minutes struggling, he could finally see the other and Jungkook gasping in the hold of that thing. Hey! Leave him! Despite his trembling body, he managed to shout at the inhuman thing in front of him, but the other was too much focused on the raven-haired, growling and trying to bite him. Taehyung's body felt frozen. His heartbeat quickened and his mind seemed to be numb when Jungkook screamed in pain, trying his best to stop the thing from biting his shoulder or neck. Do something, do something. Chanting to himself, he looked around in a great panic to find anything of help, but there was nothing much except for the half-rotten logs and small branches. He wanted to help him like the older did many times. Pulling on his own hair harshly, he rushed back to the cabin to find nothing but the old chair near the table. Without having second thoughts, he grabbed it and ran outside to slam that right at the head of the unidentified thing. The monster stopped, forcing Jungkook on the impact. It was like a small pause. A very tense pause as Taehyung watched the broken chair pieces on the ground and nothing much happened to the other. He gaped loudly when the thing threw Jungkook away, causing the Revent to fall at a distance after being hit by the fence. But before he could rush to help the older who lay there lifeless after the torture, the thing roared in front of him. The loud growl made the silver-haired stumbled back when the face came into view. It was the same hybrid he saw before, but with a more murderous look on his distorted face. Those eyes, which looked rather calm before, were filled with rage, hunger, or thirst, and that made him shudder badly. With his ragged and shallow breathing, he stepped back in terror, limbs ready to give up, but the adrenaline in his veins kept him much aware of the situation. The hybrid, or more like a mysterious being, stepped towards him without any limps, his eyes shining red, black veins popping out in the remaining white of the ball. The remaining skin was starting to rot, while the skin near his jaw was completely gone. The stench, the same stench of the ghouls, made the silver-haired gauge, but he covered his mouth, eyeing the broken wooden pieces on the ground. His shaky pupils fell on the raven-haired, who was still laying in the same position, and it just made his heart drop in fear. The poor male was still screaming, but it was dying slowly, just like his hope. The hybrid kept on eyeing him for a moment, and when he thought that he could use it to escape and get the wooden piece, he heard the loud growling of the ghouls, and he was sure that another poor soul became their meal. The tall being snapped his head back on the howling and let out a deep growl as well, making Taehyung's spine shiver in fear. Now or never. Looking at the slightly distracted hybrid, he quickly ducked down to roll over the ground as his hand desperately tried to get hold of the wooden piece, but a blood-curdling scream left his chapped lips when the beast stepped on his hand and cracked it right there, breaking his wrist bone right at the moment. Before he could take a hold of his emotions, he was lifted up by his throat, making him at the level of the slightly distorted face. The bony hand pressed harder on his throat, suffocating him fully as those red and black eyes stared down at his soul. The stench was itself torturing, and the pressure just made it more difficult to take in any amount of oxygen. His right hand was already immobile after broken bones, and his left hand weakly tried to release himself from the strong grip, but was of no use. The ghouls again roared at a distance, making him look towards the forest, and he saw many pairs of glowing red eyes looking at him. His lungs started to give up, but his mind was still trying to keep him awake, hand still weakly fighting and landing on the bones of the long hand. "Hyung, are you okay? Please. Get up, please be alive." Glancing for the last time at the still body of the raven-haired with his blurry vision, he let his hand fall on his side, feeling disgusted when the beast leaned over his face to lick his neck with teeth grazing there. But he couldn't fight anymore. Closing his eyes with only one thought in his head, "I'm sorry, Hyung." Understand. Hidden? Beast, monster, or hybrid? It wasn't a clear answer yet, but whatever it was, one thing was sure: it screamed danger. The eerie silence of the thick forest was once again back, like no one died there a few moments ago, like there wasn't any chaos going on there, like it wasn't dangerous. In the same silence, there laid the silver-haired on that uncomfortable bed. Once again, the small whimpers and groaning made him realize that he wasn't alone. His stomach, wrist, ankle, and every fiber of his body were in pain that it was so difficult to move even an inch. But at the same time, it was a clear sign that he was still alive. Before he could fight off his pain and open his eyes, a soft and wet cloth touched his forehead, then cheeks and neck, like someone was wiping off something from his skin. The coldness made him shudder, realizing that his body was quite hot compared to the cloth. "Sure, it's okay. Just rest." A soothing voice, the voice he was waiting to hear, said near his ear. Another whimper left his dry lips as a throb made him feel jolts of pain throughout his body, but right at that moment, a soft caress started lulling him to a deep slumber, giving him a small break from unbearable pain. He wasn't sure of how much time already spent like that, fighting with his pains and trying to open his eyes. After a lot of effort, when he finally opened his eyes, the first thing he noticed with his hazy and blurry sight was a dark room. On instinct, he bolted up only to groan in pain that was still present throughout his body. When his eyes felt accustomed to the dark, he felt like crying upon seeing the same wooden cabin. Even though he wasn't sure of why he felt like that, maybe he was happy that he survived and most probably Jungkook brought him here, or maybe he was frustrated to be back. "Oh my god." The voice made him whip his neck on the right side only to cry in pain. "Calm down, baby, please. Jungkook looked more panicked as he reached his slightly fisted hand and kissed the back of his palm many times. "Lay down, you're not fine, pup." Hearing that, Taehyung felt a bit puzzled, but reels in mind started to work when Jungkook turned on the torch and he saw his ankle and right hand wrapped in Older's clothes, a wet cloth laying over his lap that was placed over his forehead when he bolted up. Events before losing his senses started to spread across his head, making him clutch over the Older's rough hand in his left one. He opened his mouth to say something, but his throat just hurt in turn, making it impossible to let out any single word. Judging from his struggle, Jungkook understood the situation and softly cupped the pale face of the other, who slightly shivered at how the hand was so cold. "You have a high fever, love. Your throat is hurt, so don't try to talk for now." Taehyung gave him a frown, again trying to talk, but a painful groan made him give up immediately. Jungkook didn't let go of his hand as he took hold of a water bottle and made him drink from it. Every single sip was going down like burning lava, which made him drink only a little amount. Once Jungkook placed the bottle back and checked his temperature, the silver-haired lost it and started crying silently. Whatever happened before was so much scary to forget, and he clearly remembered how the Older was laying lifeless that almost made him believe that he lost him. "Baby, don't cry, please." Taehyung shook his head lightly as his neck was hurting, but avoiding it all. He leaned over the other's shoulder, who didn't waste any moment to engulf him in an assuring hug. "It's okay, we survived again. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for saving me." Jungkook slightly pulled back with great care and gulped thickly when he saw the marks over the other's skin. Biting his lips harshly, he softly wiped the younger's tears and pecked his eyes gently. "You shouldn't have to do it. You got badly injured because of me." Taehyung was still crying silently when Jungkook pulled back and tried to smile at him, but he could feel the wobbles. Avoiding throbs in his neck, he again leaned forward and kissed the other's jaw as he couldn't move his neck up to kiss his cheeks. "Baby, don't move your neck, it's not good." Taehyung smiled lightly and scanned the other's body to find many scratches and some minor wounds on his arms, and some deep wounds on his neck that made him frown and teary again. Jungkook smiled and again pecked his forehead and cheeks. "It doesn't hurt anymore." But the younger one doesn't look satisfied with the answer. "You scared me to death, baby." Jungkook again started as he made him lay back again with great care. "When I woke up, I found that thing throwing you away and Taehyung shuddered to recall those horrible eyes. "Thank God, I found my knife at a distance and tried to attack his back. I don't know how it happened, but he rushed out of the fence after the ghouls growled suddenly." Taehyung clenched his fist again, but Jungkook didn't let him by threading his own fingers among those long ones. "You were not breathing at that time. I was so lost, but somehow managed to give you CPR." Taehyung squeezed back the Older's hand as again no word left his vocal cords. Jungkook inhaled deeply, sniffing as he hastily wiped his tears before giving a small smile to the silver-haired. "You were out for 3 days, baby, and it scared me so much." The wobbling lips were tortured by the teeth to stop the movements, and Taehyung felt his eyes getting teary again, noticing the dark circles and tired look of the other that was screaming that he didn't sleep well in the past days. Thank you so much for fighting all this time. You're so brave, so much brave, my love." Leaving so many pecks over his face, Jungkook kept on muttering sweet words that melted his heart. In the end, he mouthed "thank you for surviving" to the Older, who nodded with the same smile, brushing his hair back to put the cloth back on his burning forehead. "Now get well sooner." The wet voice of the Revent sent a pang to his heart, but he managed a small nod in response, already feeling tired. "Baby, please don't sleep like that again. You need to eat something. You haven't eaten anything for the past 3 days." Noticing those droopy eyes, Jungkook exclaimed. As the other couldn't chew or swallow the fruits easily, Jungkook crushed them with his hands after covering them with Taehyung's washed handkerchief. He made the younger drink that juice and let him sleep again. The next day, Taehyung felt a bit better as his fever seemed to subside, but his neck was still hurting the same, and so were his broken wrist and ankle. After feeding him the juice, Jungkook went out saying that he need to find some herbs to heal him faster, as he couldn't see the younger so frail and weak. So, he went out for a troll within their safe range that doesn't feel safe anymore. It was already a bit of time when the Older left and Taehyung couldn't sleep anymore. He moved his leg to hiss and let his head fall back like his neck allowed it to. So much was messing with his mind, but he tried his best to keep those thoughts away for now, because he just wanted to be healthy again so that they can leave this hell as soon as possible. Jungkook was so caring and it was giving him some warmth in that cold environment. How much he missed his old life, but now he just imagined his new life with a certain revent in his old apartment. Smiling at the thought, he moved his eyes around only to feel surprised when those focused on the broken and slightly hanging lock at the door. Oh, it must have broken down that time, but we got distracted. Sighing sadly, he kept laying in the same position until something made his curiosity back, causing him to get up from the bed with great difficulty. After a lot of effort, he managed to reach the door and removed the lock with his left hand. Grimacing at the way rust stuck on his skin, taking a deep breath, he pushed the door that opened with a very loud creak, breaking the silence harshly. Biting on his lips, he limped forward and pushed the door more to look inside. The inside looked dark, making it impossible to locate anything that almost made him give up. Hyung won't allow me to stand up in this situation. Thinking about that, he quickly spotted the torch and again came back to the mysterious room, hissing here and there with every pang. Glancing back at the front door of the cabin, he gulped thickly before inhaling deeply as his hand reached to open the door more widely. With his left hand, he pointed the torch inside the dark room, illuminating the room he was very much curious about. His eyes turned back disappointed when he found nothing but an empty room without any single small thing. Smacking his dry lips twice, he turned back after directing the light for the last time on the empty walls of the room, but as he turned, his wrist throbbed as it touched the wall, making his other hand quiver, leaving the torch that fell on the floor with a clank. Contemplating for a moment, he ducked down, keeping his neck straight, and was facing the opposite wall of the room. Just when he was about to grab the torch, something caught his attention. Zeroing his eyes on the slit-like opening, he got up and limped towards the crack in the wooden floor, only to gasp in surprise when he moved the supposedly broken wooden slab, because it wasn't a broken wooden slab or a crack, but a hidden staircase leading to a basement. 20 ruckus of darkness. There wasn't any wind, but the room felt extremely cold, dusty, and dirty. That square slab of wood, previously part of the floor, was still laying beside his feet, but his eyes were not on that, instead fixed on the metal staircase leading to the only darkness. Roaming his eyes around the empty room once again, he gulped and pointed the torch down the narrow staircase to see anything, but to his dismay, he only saw the metal stair. Standing there for more minutes and contemplating on what to do or what not, he started to feel tired by weighing on only his one leg. I'll tell Hyung about that, maybe we can find something useful down there. Nodding to himself, he decided to walk back to the cabin, not before dragging the slab back into its place. When he reached his bed after closing the room again and placing the torch back after so much effort, he laid back on the stiff mattress to wait for the older. Why he didn't notice the broken lock in the past few days? The question bothered him a bit, but he shook himself after scolding mentally as he remembered the older freaked out on his condition. Time passed, but there wasn't any sign of the raven-haired, and it started to make him worried. There was some silence around the whole place as it was daytime, and the beasts must be resting somewhere after their meal. Only the thought of that made the silver-haired shudder and close his eyes in disgust, clearly recalling those horrible red and black eyes. A slow and small creak of the door made him open his eyes, only to sigh in relief as he saw the older entering the cabin with a slight limp and a few things in his hands and stuffed in his pants pockets. "Oh, you're awake. I thought you must be asleep again." Jungkook smiled, looking back at the younger who tried to sit up. "Easy there, tiger." Jungkook quickly helped him and kissed his forehead with a lingering one. Pulling back with a contented smile, he softly caressed the cheeks of the younger. "I miss your slightly filled cheeks. You are getting so weak, pup." Taehyung sighed, clearly aware of that change as well. After all, he barely managed to eat well and digest the fruits in that environment. Also, all the tragic events were already playing with his mental health. He again tried to speak, and this time after a little bit of pain in his throat, words left his chapped lips. "I'm fine." The raspy and croaked voice caused a frown on the other's face that soon melted into a sweet smile. "It's so good to hear your voice again, love. But don't force yourself till you're healed properly." Taehyung smiled and felt his eyes fluttering when the older leaned forward and kissed his Adam's apple many times, slow and sensual. "Is it still stiff?" Taehyung slightly nodded, taking the other's shirt in his left palm when the sweet torture continued on his skin. Don't worry. Hyung brought some herbs for your wounds." But he still didn't move away from the skin. Taehyung started to feel hazy when a cold hand touched his nape and the other entered beneath his shirt, leaving smooth and gentle traces over his back and stomach. Young dash, shoo, it's okay. Jungkook smiled over his skin, continuing his touches as he let go of the nape and removed the things from his pockets as he felt bothered by those. Taehyung opened his eyes to the loss of warmth and found the other placing the small herbs on the mattress at a distance before going back to his skin. The silver-haired let the other leave all the kisses and touches over his body until he felt wetness over his neck and soft sniffles. Sure, you might hurt your throat again. Saying that, he pulled back only to hide his face with a small awkward chuckle. Taehyung looked worried but melted when the other placed his head over his chest, carefully avoiding his broken wrist and ankle. He watched as the other curled himself like a child in between his legs and hugged him hungrily. It felt like a dream sometimes. I'm so happy that you're awake and alive. The slight wetness in the voice made Taehyung smile. He found his left arm wrapping around the older's torso. If he was in a normal situation, he might have felt awkward in the position because he never let anyone be this much closer to his body, except for Jin and Jimin, but there was a limit for them. But now, everything seemed so normal for him, like he was bound for that, all like that was his fate. Unconsciously, his lips tried to reach other's hair but stopped due to an ache in his neck. On the small whimpering, Jungkook quickly looked up to find the other frowning in pain and discomfort. Taehyung didn't know what happened, but as the older came closer to soothe his stiff muscles, he placed his lips over those thin and soft ones. Shock? It was a small term to explain the Raven's expressions. He was totally awestruck by the younger's move, but before he could gather his thoughts and respond, Taehyung pulled back to only turn red in embarrassment at what he just did. He didn't like it. Thinking in his mind, Taehyung bit his lips and mouthed "I'm sorry," but almost felt the air knocked out when the other get hold of his lips, in a very passionate way. That day, they spent their whole time filling up each other's invisible emptiness with their gentle touches that screamed their love for each other. That evening they decided to pour their love through kisses. That night, Taehyung found himself falling for the other completely, who was already head over heels for him, that he even forgot his pains and everything else. Everything. Where is this place? The boy in his mid-20s with an American accent asked with a deep frown settled on his forehead. Hey, I'm asking you. The cab driver seemed totally okay with all the shouting and yelling as the doors were locked. Stop it. That's not the way. I know the way to Busan. Stop the car. Stop it, you foo *K***R. The boy got agitated by the lack of response, already aware of the surroundings being dangerous. A sudden pull of brakes made him stumble forward as the car tire screeched on the bumpy road, and the surroundings fell into deep silence once again. What's this place? This is not the right path, and this place is not even on this map. The driver chuckled at that, turning his head to face the now freaking boy who had his eyes fixed on the map in his hands. Sorry about that, boy, but I need to do it. The boy was oblivious to what the other was saying. If you needed money, you could have done it somewhere near the city. Why here? The older of the two laughed out on that, shaking his head as he sighed at the end. It's complicated, but one thing is for sure. He gave a very blank look on that, causing the poor boy to feel horrified. I'm not doing it for money. The door opened, and the driver came out of it to just push him out of the cab and throw him on the dark road with his luggage as well. Once again, sorry. The boy got up, very much ready to fight back, but felt someone standing behind him. He turned back with his trembling body to find a figure at a distance. The darkness didn't help much, so he pulled out his phone to turn on the torch only to gasp. Mori! The figure roared, causing him to shiver in fear. He stumbled back to get to the car, but to his surprise, the cab driver was standing near the door with his bowed head. I'm trying, but people are reporting missing and are avoiding hiring cabs for longer journeys. The driver mumbled in his low and shaky voice, clearly terrified as the other. Taking his chance, the boy tried to run, but the poor one was thrown back as many new figures launched at him, causing the driver to shriek in fear. The taller one of them roared again, causing the driver to just sneak out of the danger as soon as possible. The boy continued screaming in pain and fear as the gruesome faces of the ghouls became visible to him. The driver closed his eyes for a brief moment, muttering a series of sorry that was heard by only the emptiness of his car. The cries of the poor lad echoed in the eerie silence as the ghouls started to devour him, tearing his own heart, and causing him to cry as well. But what could he do? After all, that was an unstoppable ruckus of darkness. 21 Doubtful. Taehyung groggily opened his eyes only to find himself alone on the bed, once again. Adjusting to the darkness of the cabin, he tried to look for the older but couldn't find him. Where did he go at this hour? A surge of curiosity mixed with worry bubbled up in his mind, causing him to stand up to limp towards the other side. Another thing to worry about, the torch wasn't there. Just when he thought to go and check the bathroom, a small rattling sound caught his attention, making him jump in slight fright. "Double, who is there?" His throat felt a bit better, but the voice was not so clear yet. When his words went deaf ears, he gulped and looked around to find any sort of shield or weapon for his safety. Licking his dry lips, he opened the bathroom door to find it empty and dark. "Where are you, Hyung?" The question started to make him uncomfortable and afraid, but he just wanted to overcome that and find the other. While taking a turn towards the bed, his gaze fell on the loosely hanging lock on the other door. The presence of darkness from the basement made his mind quickly not even think about going there at this hour. Right when he turned his gaze back to the bed, the main door of the cabin opened and a panting raven-haired entered there. "Hyung!" Hearing his voice, Jungkook marched towards him and hugged him gently before getting him to the bed. "What happened?" Jungkook bit his lip and reached for the torch that he forgot to turn off. I heard someone screaming near, a boy maybe." Taehyung frowned when he noticed the sweaty face and disheveled look of the older. Bringing his hand up, he softly brushed back the long strands to see a gash on his forehead. "Hyung, you're hurt." Jungkook smiled at the concern but shook his head, taking his hand instead to peck softly. "I fell while running away from ghouls." Taehyung's eyes widened at the possible scenarios. "Don't worry, nothing bad happened to me," Jungkook hummed, but there was a sad look in his eyes as he again pecked his hand. "But I couldn't save the boy." Hearing the news of another death made the younger sigh in frustration. It's been just a few weeks and he was already losing his mind over those never-ending murders. "I wish I could find some solution for this all." Jungkook's tired and raspy voice made him look back at the other, who fell back on the mattress. "Will I be selfish if I say I just want to save our lives first?" Taehyung mumbled, noticing the look on Jungkook's face changing quickly. "No, you won't be, love." Nodding to the response, he made himself lay back on the mattress and curl on as much as his injured body allowed. It didn't take long when the other joined him quickly and wrapped him in his embrace very gently. "We will live a free life soon." Taehyung smiled and snuggled back on the other's chest before feeling the same need to keep himself near the older. Inhaling deeply, he mumbled out, "We will." In the next few days, nothing much happened except for the recovery of the silver-haired. He wasn't able to walk freely or move his hand because of the slow recovery of broken bones, but at least, he started talking normally and his neck wasn't stiff anymore. Jungkook was again doing the job of feeding the two, and keeping the younger very much pampered even in that situation. Taehyung mentioned the basement, but Jungkook scolded him, saying that he shouldn't walk around, especially when the place is so mysterious. He agreed, thinking that they just need to escape as soon as possible without catching up with more troubles. Luckily, that hybrid didn't come again after that night, and Taehyung couldn't be more grateful for that. He was praying to just be able to walk again so that they can escape from this hell. And now, when he was able to walk a bit better, he mentioned about trying to leave for Jungkook. "You sure about that?" Taehyung nodded at the question, gulping that new fruit that was very tasty, but he mostly avoided that. But as the weather was changing, other berries and even apples weren't producing like before. "As you said before, it was just sprained badly, not broken like my wrist." Jungkook nodded this time and put a few more small fruits in front of him. "Okay then, eat a lot and we will try again after a little while." There wasn't any excitement at all, but just fear that Taehyung felt in his whole body at the thought of facing those beasts again. Jungkook didn't let him leave the bed as he was busy arranging things to leave, and Taehyung watched him from the bed. It was very unexpected as the latter kept on watching him until he fell into an abyss. "Up! Wake up!" The distant voice of the older made him scrunch his nose as his body was so exhausted, like he ran a marathon. "Baby!" A soft shake to his shoulder made him open his eyes to find the older leaned above him with concern-filled eyes. "What?" Jungkook sighed and leaned back with relief washed over his face. "You fell asleep and woke up just now after a whole day." Taehyung narrowed his eyes, trying to remember the last scenes before he fall asleep. He vividly recalled their plan to leave and him watching the older pack their things. How can I fall asleep like that? We had to leave. Jungkook sighed and softly cupped his face with both of his hands. I don't know either. You were out cold and I was very close to breaking down. Taehyung still felt very conflicted about that strange event, but he decided to console the older first. In the end, they postponed the plan to the next day as it was already evening and none of them was enough ready to fight off the roaming beasts. The next morning, after finishing their little breakfast with surging adrenaline, they left the cabin once again with the hope to have their freedom back. Jungkook was walking before Taehyung, his knife in his hand and the other having a secure grip around the younger's left hand. With each step, Taehyung felt his heart thudding against his ribcage after they left their so-called safe zones. Maybe their prayers were heard as they didn't see any of those monsters in their way, so far, which made them kind of a bit relaxed. Let's take this way, last time we encountered them on the other one, Jungkook whispered near his ear, not even tearing his gaze away from the surroundings. Taehyung just gave him a small nod in response as they made silent steps ahead. Jungkook swiftly cut the long branches in their ways like a pro, and Taehyung couldn't help but feel awestruck at the other's instincts. Walking more for a few minutes, Jungkook suddenly halted in his steps, making him stop as well. Don't look here, yeah? Taehyung gulped, already knowing what the other must have seen to stop him from looking. He watched as Jungkook carefully ducked down to grab something as he himself tried his best to look around and not to look at the front. It's a bag full of different things, Jungkook mumbled softly, looking for any device that could help them escape but sighed disappointedly at the end when finding none. Taehyung tugged on his shirt when he heard some rustling from a distance. When his gaze fell on the older's black orbs, he found the other already alert and focused in the same direction as well. Let's go. This time Jungkook mouthed instead of speaking, and Taehyung just bit his lip again in anticipation as he could feel his skin crawling. Trying to avoid the sound and a few remnants of the poor soul, he limped forth only to stumble on a small branch that he couldn't see because of his slightly blurry vision. Jungkook was quick to stabilize his body before he could fall face first. You okay? Hearing another whisper, he nodded even when he was sure that he wasn't. With every little step, he could feel his breathing getting heavier and his heartbeat so loud that it was the only sound he could hear at that time. His feet halted when his body felt very exhausted, causing the raven-haired to stop as well. He could see the other's blurry face saying something to him, but he was too distracted to even hear it until he fell forward limply in the arms of the older, letting his exhausted body rest without his will. The next time when he opened his eyes, he found himself laying back on the bed in the cabin, making him feel extremely angry and annoyed once he remembered everything. You're awake finally. Jungkook's usually soft voice beamed, causing him to whip his neck in the direction of the sound. Feeling irritated by the other's very calm behavior, Taehyung felt his anger bubbling up more. Why did you bring me back? We were halfway through the forest. Jungkook frowned, stopping his hand from folding the clothes from a new bag. You fainted there, pup. Why back here? Ignoring the other's hurt expressions, he lashed out again. Because we had nowhere else to go, Jungkook replied through his calm demeanor, trying to approach the younger's hand but couldn't as the other yanked it away. Really? Jungkook gritted his teeth and nodded before standing up from the bed. I'm sorry for disappointing you, but unfortunately, I couldn't escape on my own because there was a horde right at the boundary and I couldn't risk your life. After muttering that, the raven-haired disappeared behind the bathroom door, leaving him in his own jumbled up thoughts. As Jungkook left him to cool down, he regretted blaming the older who didn't even complain about him being a burden by fainting out of a sudden. He was ready to apologize to other, but some questions didn't leave his mind, making him anxious and sort of doubtful about things. What's happening with me and my body? I wasn't this weak before. How can I faint like that? You need to rest more, I guess. It happened twice. Jungkook mumbled, passing by the bed to get the new bag but was halted by the harsh tone of the younger. You were injured too, we ate the same, then why only me? I'm not that weak. Taehyung spat, not realizing the depth of the words that the other quickly understood. What do you mean? What's going on in your mind, pup? Taehyung frowned, got up from the bed, and limped towards the other who had a concern-filled gaze focused on his steps. I don't know, okay? Whenever we try to escape, something like this happens. Jungkook frowned upon this, walking towards him as he tilted his head a bit to the side. Are you doubtful about me, pretty boy? Taehyung turned his head to the side. His words were just spilling out in frustration without much of his attention. Jungkook stepped forth and whispered, leaning forward before touching his broken wrist gently. Taehyung gulped on seeing the other's changing behavior but stay rooted. It's not Dash. You think I don't want to leave this hell, right? Taehyung blinked rapidly, slightly shaking his head when the other entered his personal space, almost touching his nose with his own while continuing his words that came out quite raspy. Because if you think that, you're right, love. 22 reasons you're right, love. What? A soft mumble left his lips with great difficulty, mind definitely not ready to accept anything anymore if the other wasn't joking. Even in that hell, he was putting all of his trust in the older, associating all of his hopes of freedom with him. But hearing those few words was like knives to him, and he wasn't ready to just believe that. He chuckled lightly, shaking his head in denial as his feet pivoted back to leave, not minding the way the other frowned at his actions. It's not the time to joke around. Jungkook gritted his teeth and didn't let him turn back before he was pushed back on the bed, not that harshly. His wavering gaze met with the older's dark one but found no speck of humor. I'm not. The words came out raspy, and the hold over his shoulders tightened a bit before leaving completely. He watched as the other sighed, pushing his free strands of hair back with a frustrated huff. Do you really mean that? After a short period of silence, Taehyung opened his mouth for confirmation. Jungkook closed his eyes, trudging back till his back hit the wall near the bed. Yes. A single word, and Taehyung felt losing all of his remaining hopes connected to the older, making him feel extremely confused. Why? Why don't you dash? This all time you're pretending? Jungkook sighed, but not responded this time, making him again furious. What does it mean? Taehyung's voice boomed inside the cabin, not minding that it could attract anything else. Can you please calm down? Taehyung's eyes squinted at the tone but shut his mouth, turning his head to the other side as his mind was still in turmoil. It wasn't so easy to just let it slide when his mind was already such a mess. I don't want to leave this place because... He sighed before taking a seat beside the younger, who still avoided his gaze but was too focused to hear the response. I've reasons. Taehyung couldn't help but scoff at that. Yeah, and I'm waiting to hear them out. What makes you stay here? This is total hell. There is nothing at all. Jungkook sighed again, trying to get his hand, but Taehyung yanked those away. When I said I want to stay here, I didn't mean to enjoy or live. Taehyung frowned when the other started with his slightly shaky voice. You may think that I'm being a fool for this, but I need to do something very important before leaving. The darkness of the evening was starting to spread in the cabin, making the tense environment more gloomy. It doesn't justify your fake attempts to leave. Jungkook rubbed his temple when Taehyung spatted harshly, something very rare he ever witnessed in the past days. My attempts weren't fake. I just didn't want to leave after finding my friend. Taehyung frowned deeply at that. Friend? The new information quipped his interest, but he found it as another betrayal when the other nodded. There was another human, and you didn't tell me before? When did you find him? How did he get stuck here? Wait, did he try to contact someone? Maybe he was lucky enough to keep his phone safe. So many things, so many questions, and so many rising hopes, but deep down he was very nervous for some unknown reasons. But his little session of questioning died down as the older croaked out a few words, adding up to his confusion. He isn't a human anymore. Jungkook licked his lips when Taehyung leaned backward, the same frown still latched on his features. Everything that was coming out of Jungkook's mouth was just making him more and more confused and frustrated. He was about to lash out again in annoyance but was caught off guard when he felt a few drops falling in front of his hands. His eyes slightly widened when he saw the other silently crying. Sudden pangs in his heart made him sad at the view, melting all of his anger in an instant. Young. Please tell me, what is it? It's just making me lose my mind. Jungkook nodded lightly, wiping his tears before taking a deep breath. I hid something from you. But believe me, I did that so you won't freak out. I never intended to hurt you in any way, baby. Taehyung felt his heart slightly doing the same thing with the name, but he kept his expression stoic. What's that? He again inquired and saw Jungkook walking back to his bag to find something and coming back to him with a sad smile. I used to have a very good friend, like one who always stays with you through thick and thin. He used to be my shield, my protector, and my savior. The way he choked, Taehyung couldn't help but feel the strong urge to hug him, but he had a conflict with his mind that was very alarmed. I met him while struggling for jobs. He wasn't much different from me except, he was more optimistic. A slight smile formed on his chapped lips, but that was short-lived to Taehyung's dismay. He helped me a lot, many times when I was left alone. Taehyung couldn't help but recall his good days with his own friends. After a loud sniff, Jungkook showed an old and folded picture of him. Taehyung watched intently, his eyes more focused on the other boy besides a widely grinning Revent who had relatively shorter hairs and bunny teeth peeking out. But it doesn't mean that he didn't notice the beautiful smile of the older. After staring for almost a whole minute, Taehyung blinked his eyes, a bit afraid of making a conclusion in his mind based on what he was seeing, because he wasn't sure of that. Also, it wasn't that clear as well. Jungkook bit his lips when the younger met his eyes, many questions swarming in those warm brown orbs that made him feel uneasy. We argued badly when he shifted to the outskirts of Seoul on an emergency basis. He was my only friend by then, not only a friend but my family as well. Taehyung's lips curved down. Witnessing the others' voices breaking after every few words made him very upset, but he stayed still, not saying anything. After that, I got stuck here. Never get the chance to find him again or apologize for my behavior. More tears fell from his eyes when he traced his fingers over the other's smiley face. But he placed the picture on the side and looked back towards the door of the cabin before pointing there. That day when that hybrid attacked us, I found something very unexpected. Taehyung frowned, Jungkook's eyes getting blank for a moment. He couldn't understand the emotions in those. Was it utter sadness? Regret? Guilt or hate? When there was a small pause, the same thing as before stirred up in Taehyung's mind, but he quickly shook that off again. Not ready to actually believe that stupid thought. That can't be true. My friend is that hybrid.